Go.
To advance our total cost of ownership agenda, we have to work constructively in all dimensions available to us. With American national standards developers such as NFPA, IEEE, ASHRAE, ICC, ASME, and some 250 others, as well as with federal, state, and local organizations. Most of our advocacy resources are devoted to leading practice discovery with subject matter experts, and then focusing the available expertise to marking up ANSI-accredited technical standards with safety and sustainability concepts that are most meaningful to our industry. However, it is also necessary to keep pace with legislative actions that seek to advance safety and sustainability concepts in a faster and more direct way than the U.S. consensus standard development processes usually permit or allow. Getting an industry's thought leaders together is no easy task, even if you could get them to agree to a two-thirds majority. Incumbent interests such as manufacturers, insurance, labor, and enforcement are able to build the cost of their legislative advocacy into the product or service they sell to our industry. They frequently find it faster and more effective to advance their economic goals directly through legislative action than through ANSI consensus standard processes. In many cases, an ANSI standard is not even necessary, and that is where Mike Anthony will continue this discussion. Mike?
Thanks, Christine. It's noteworthy that only about 20% of U.S. economic activity is actually governed by standards or ANSI standards. So even if you measure that by GDP, it would be about 3.6 trillion. So that's enough for us. That's plenty for us to work on. I'm going to start out this week by giving one example of how a federal law advocated principally by incumbents has had the minimum effect compared with the other alternatives that might have, had they come through ANSI processes, gotten to the best way of doing things faster. And I'll use the example of premium efficiency motors, transformers. There are others. So a new standard was written as part of one of the larger bills to make it mandatory that premium efficiency transformers be the law of the land, because at 50% loading, they would be the least number of losses. And that's the benchmark that was set by the government, federal government, using their experts, in which the transformer had the least losses. These premium efficiency transformers are roughly twice the cost of a traditional spec-grade transformer. The problem arises, and our principal complaint is that these building transformers, especially the building transformers in the education and healthcare facilities industry, generally considered to be a commercial class transformers, never get to the 50% loading. They don't even get to 25% loading. They're more on the order of 15 to 20% loaded. And we've reported that in some of the academic and trade journals that you can access on our website. So when transformers are half the size, and the conduit, the wire, and the panel boards are half the size, you get some gains also in safety, but in general, this does cut into the profit margins of the producer interest. But it does reduce our first cost and our running costs in a very dramatic way. But because so many of our, we have to be careful that our trade associations are very often aligned with the incumbent interests, so there's no organized way to advocate in a manner that suggests that there's consensus within the industry. So, which means, in other words, we're on our own. It can be a very sensitive topic, but in general, we're on our own to follow closely the federal action. Now, to be fair, the public does have a comment period. It's always welcome to engage, even as private individuals. You'll find many experts in academia will often will often write these departments. And if you go to all the Federal Register announcements, you will see that they're very open about how you can produce government, or at least affect government legislation. We'll get to some of those sites in a minute. But we will see. But I have to tell you that I feel I can commiserate with the federal agencies with what seems to be the public's indifference. We can see the same indifference by the education facility industry leaders to engagement in federal processes as the indifference to support for advocacy using ANSI processes, whether it's because the public sector has so little capacity, or whether it's willful complicity, by the trade associations or their limits under the tax code, that's probably another discussion. We have touched on that sensitive issue maybe 2 or 3 months ago about the delicate balancing act. In any case, as always, these federal proposals are always well intentioned. And they'll often start out by saying, how can you be against safety? How can you possibly be against sustainability? Well, we're for both of them. So we just have a different way of accomplishment. And that means we're working from the work point generally up rather than from policy down. It's my personal thesis that there's an oversupply of policy makers and an undersupply of people supported at the work point who can bring up their ideas, their innovative ideas. So that much said, that's another discussion, and I suppose let's run through our work week. But first, I want to make sure that we understand that who else is on the call today. Obviously, there's Christine. Dennis, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Yeah, this is Dennis Johnson, and it looks like we have Mike Toner, our man in LA, on the call. I think he's muted. Hey, Mike. Yeah, okay, I can see you there. Looks like we got an audio problem from LA. We're going to go to Iowa today. Hey, how are you doing? How you doing, Mike?
I'm good.
Great. So we're getting a little bit better. We have Dennis, Christine, you and I, and Jack Janveja, my colleague here, is also in the so-called studio, and we will get rolling here to get our conference over before 2:30 rolls along. So here's our topic. I think I'd like to get through the week's work, though, and let's get over to our website and see what we've been up to. Oh, you know what? It's our tradition. We like to see what other construction is going on. And so here we're in Iowa. As I like to remind our viewers that we are the largest non-residential construction market, building construction market in the country. That means that when you consider that that's at 75 billion, once a month we actually report that. That's about the size of Microsoft. So in general, to get a sense of how much our industry is constructing every year, think of we're adding an entirely new Microsoft corporation to our fleet of square footage every year. Okay, so that's where we are with our traditional view of what else is going on in the industry. So let's go to the week's work, and what do we do here? So we do this in reverse order. So this was posted today by Christine. This is follow-up to last month's post regarding the Group A codes. The building codes, these are the ones that affect us considerably. Good news and bad news. Good news is that we had 6 proposals out there on the plumbing code and the building code. The bad news is that only 4 universities submitted proposals, and we'll try to do better, but that's where we're at. The one trade association, 2 trade associations produced one of them. You'll see that in a minute. But it'd be nice to have more engagement here. So we can persist now. We can be involved in the next round of committee hearings in Long Beach in October. So we'll have to prepare some responses. So we will have a special session on that next month. There's a fair amount of time there. So here we are. I felt that this was newsworthy this week. It turns out that the ASTM is the ANSI standards organization for athletic standards. And since this was an issue that Dennis was looking into, we played around with this in the past. As you can see, let's go to athletics and recreation. If you go to our website here and we've been looking at swimming pools. There's again, whenever we feel it's a facility class or an equipment class, we try to we try to identify it. Not everyone is able to engage here, but there's some fairly high level action happening here in the athletics and the public the public spaces where we're conducting sporting events. So I'm going to let Dennis talk for a moment about what his findings were with this particular suite of standards. You have a minute, Dennis?
Yes, I can talk. So, hello.
Yep.
So the ASTM International Technical Committee, FOA, Sports Equipment, Playing Surfaces, and Facilities. So they are the ones that basically govern these four objectives that you see on the screen. Now, what we noticed, for example, for like football helmets, it costs between $400 to $1,000 to get these helmets made. Now, that's $400 to $1,000 for each helmet, which means when they buy sets, for example, when they buy a set of 100, it comes to be around $50,000 to $100,000. Now, the committee that basically governed the standards for these helmets exist was established in 1969. They have over 800 members. They have over 30 subcommittees, and over 170 standards have been produced from this committee. Now, when I asked the committee to be a part of their committee list to find out who was basically implementing these standards and developing these policies, they wouldn't give me a list. It's a lot of bureaucracy and gridlock to get the list, but we'll keep trying to get it.
Yeah, that's fairly common. NFPA does the best job, but I think it's more common the case that the standards developers are circumspect about their committee members. Sometimes the committee members want to do that. Sometimes, very often, you mentioned there's 800 people on that one. That committee list is actually a valued product because that can be sold as an affinity product list. So that's why they probably have to. It's probably why they have to be circumspect. There's a business case for that. And we have to be respectful. I don't think anybody. We need these ANSI standards developers, which is part of the reason we're talking about. That's the subject of our weekly discussion here. We have to be respectful of their business model. So we'll find a way. It sure seems to me $1,000 a football helmet's a lot. And those of you who are old enough to remember the $800 hammers sold to the Defense Department, a lot of that originated from the creation of a military specification for a hammer that only a few market stakeholders were able to meet. So if you write the standard for a military hammer, it's not going to be like a regular hammer, or maybe it is. In any case, it ends up being $800. We can't say that that's happening here, but again, if you have more competition in the market, it's likely that the price of those football helmets could go on. That's not really in the facility space, but in other areas such as turf, many facility organizations are dealing with turf. So we'll come back to this again. We'll circle back to it, but I thought it would be interesting that in a week in which there's some rather marquee events in the news regarding footballs. In fact, you know, Dennis, you and I could propose a standard for inflating a football. We should do that so we get to know the process a little bit more.
Yeah,
All
we
right.
could.
Got some laughter out of that one. Okay. So let's see. Let's go back. That was yesterday. And what else did we do this week? We did. Okay, so you want to be involved in that discussion. We'll put some words on paper and put it in front of the committee. This is Dave Anderson's wet bulb temperature concept. We're pretty excited about this. It's not it's more of a simplification of an algorithm, but we feel that the simplification was actually a more effective way to develop turn on and turn off signals. There's a lot of thermal inertia in moving large amounts of air, and we feel that this simplification, the simpler algorithm, will likely deliver some results. This number here is closer to 10 million, but we have to give an order of magnitude on this. We spend about 30 billion on a utility cost in our industry, so that's out 10 to the minus 4 power. So it's significant, but we shouldn't be turning down $10 million opportunities. Let's put it that way. So here we have ISCA, good group out of Washington. We're expanding our attention beyond the eyewash test. If you go and if you search on ISCA, you see we're working on the eyewash test to see if we can rationalize that using reliability-centered maintenance concepts. So that's a continuing discussion, and we'd like to get some interim changes on that. But in any case, they always have other standards. These are the workplace safety kits, and we just want to make sure that they're appropriately priced by making sure that they're not over-specified to limit the competitive field on them. And I see we started the week. Where did we start the week? Was this yours? Excuse me, no. This Dennis, you're working on this one. So ANSI is the U.S. Technical Advisory Group to the International Standard for Sustainable Cities. It's a slow-moving standard. It'll be developed by the ISO, and we're helping our national group, IANSI, pull together the best ideas for the ISO conception of a sustainable city. And let's see, I guess we started the week here with the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, which kind of inspired my selection for this week's discussion. It has to do with how much federal legislation is coming down. And I guess what I can do is to just dramatize my point here. Is if we were to look at, so this is this is a website. I believe it's run by the government. There are many organizations that are running sites like this, but this appears to have the government's endorsement. You can see that today there are 37 new legislative proposals coming in where there's comments due today. It's a Friday, I guess it makes sense. The next 3 days, within the next 3 months, there's 1,100. If we were to look at some of these, you would see that some of the agencies are required to go to the public and ask for information. You'll see that by the DOE very shortly. Agency information collection activities. So you can see that these agencies try to be data driven. And if they don't get the data from our industry, that causes problems for their agenda. So I truly believe that the federal government is filled almost as every bit as least as honorable people as we are, and they try to be data driven. But if you have public apathy, then that's a problem that many organizations deal with. So you can see that there's no shortage of ideas being presented coming out of the federal government, and these are all commenting opportunities. I would say that out of this 1,100. These 1,100 ideas here, that probably 10%, maybe 20% are relevant to our industry. So I think I can cut back to our Prezi and get to the point here. Any questions on what I've said so far there? Anybody? Y'all can hear me still?
Yes.
You still awake? Cool.
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's get to our Prezi here now. Again, another tradition, I try to give us some numbers to steer by, and so it's a relatively good week. We'll be having 17 proposals and comments going out this week. By the end of tonight, we should have 18 of them. And this is a number I like. I like to see this number no greater than 1. That means that we're putting an idea out there every day. That's a good thing. If we look or take a larger view, it looks like for the 11 months starting July 2014 to 2015, that rolling window, we now have about 175 ideas on the table. I'm always happy if 10% of them are accepted, and of that 10%, if 10% of them will very often have significant and meaningful impact on an industry. So that's what a pipeline looks like. As you can see, we try as best we can to follow and go through the standards developers transcripts that are available to us and to count which universities show up, and then also the trade associations if they're doing anything. We've recently developed a stronger relationship with BOMA. I think that was a subject a week or two ago, where they were claiming a 6 to 7% avoided regulatory burden. So in any case, this is another thing we can we use as one of our metrics to determine our performance. Of course, how much airplay are we getting? I think we're up to, I checked this morning, we're up to 1,400 views since 2014. So as dry as this subject can be, as amateurish as some of these presentation clips are, we still seem to find some interest. So here's another thing about our market. Student enrollment is down about 2%. These numbers came out Tuesday or Wednesday, I think. I thought they were interesting. It's not our job to look at this other than to be mindful that we do have to compete with other alternatives. And of course, U of M is among many universities that aren't just in the teaching business. There's also research, healthcare delivery, healthcare research, such and so forth. I'm going to put this out here. This is not anyone is too familiar with, but this is an outcome from the IEEE conference I attended last week in Calgary. Many of my colleagues are concerned about more marketing and less R&D. There's many areas where we feel that they're just selling the same old stuff within a different package. We'd like to see more we would like to see more R&D. So I mentioned the amount of cash in the balance sheets. In general, the global diversifieds are spending something on the order of 2 to 4% on research and development, and for their 2 to 4%, they will get 2 to 4% revenue growth, and they're happy with that. A tech company, which might be putting out 10% toward R&D, is getting 10% growth. So there is a correlation between how much money you spend on trying out new stuff and how much your revenue grows. And certainly there's no lack of money. These are the largest companies on earth here, at least in the United States, and they have more cash than they've ever had. A lot of this, they claim, is that they're fearful of currency problems. As you recently might have heard, the euro went to near parity with the United States dollar, so they claim they need a cushion. So they want a cash hoard. It's basically cash in the bank. They're not putting that money toward trying new things, and we'd like them to try new things. Let's see, what else here? So this is more about, I think I'm talking too long here, so I'm going to hurry through this. We wanted to take a look at, so Dennis and I will be looking at the athletic, this is the athletic industry, I believe. This is athletic and sporting good manufacturers. So I was surprised how low it was, given that athletics play such a large part in especially large universities like our own. But it's only a $9.2 billion industry. It's still large by comparison, but many other industries. But it sure seems to me that athletics has an outsized. Athletics tend to convey a brand that seems to be out beyond what they're actually spending on the equipment. So can't talk too much a little bit about that, but that's, again, a number to steer by.
Page?
Sure, go ahead. You want to talk a little bit about something there? Go ahead.
Nothing. I was just going to ask. I know, just being young, I know like athletics, it's in the video gaming industry, it's in the clothing industry.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't see all that in there. So I wonder, is that just dealing strictly with like the sport teams?
Yes.
The basics of sports.
Well, because we're U of M, this is a subscription we get through the business school. It's very helpful. It helps you understand the business. Remember, our job is to make sure the economy is healthy, which means we are good fiscal stewards, but we also have to encourage growth in the U.S. economy. And our way of doing that is to making sure we have healthy suppliers. This is a way for us to understand them. And that's about all I can say. It looks like the football helmets and the AstroTurf are in this segment here.
Okay.
So that's what we'll do. So 37% of that $9 billion then. And I'm going to guess that the better part of that number, whatever that number is probably into the education industry. Not necessarily education facilities. It's in the athletic department and all the related facilities. So we can talk about athletic facilities at some point in a focus session when we talk about the money. I do have some contacts at the NCAA, but remember, they're largely academic. Finally, I wanted to say good things about our friends in the federal government. They are helping us a bit on one of our projects. They're extending their deadline for public input on the energy codes. There's some back and forth about the degree to which the Department of Energy is competing with the private sector in standards development. So I want to make a data point known, and that is they are showing their magnanimity here. Magnanimity? Whatever that word is that I have a hard time saying. Magnanimous. That they want public input. This is an indication. If this is a data point, it's an indication that the public could be more involved. And since we're a $300 billion industry, we need to be in that space. And we have already talked to them a bit about how we can contribute here. So any questions? How am I doing on time?
5 minutes.
Oh, dear. Okay, thank you. So what I wanted to, that means I have to hurry up and get through all this. So what we're going to do is have a look at, so I've tried to show you all of I've taken 3 cabinet level departments. They are proposing legislation, and obviously it's coming directly out of individual senators and representatives. So rather than go through all of these, I'd actually hope to get through a few of them. I wanted you to see where some of this is inspired by, and I sure hope I haven't lost my page here. Let's go to here. I think this is it. I expanded it. Here we go. That's what I wanted to show. So this was just signed into law. This was our call last week. We talked about this one. But I wanted you to see there's some spin-off legislation here, and there's no shortage of it. So you have the word energy in there. That seems to be a word that causes a lot of proposals. So, of course, energy is an important strategic consideration, but one has to ask why all these extra bills here. I was going to take out Mr. Franken's bills, what appears to have a lot of, I'll call it accessories. There's a lot of accessories on these bills. And I guess I'll just leave it at that. So suffice to say, it appears as though there's a lot of support for energy legislation. And the connection we like to make here very shortly is that it's likely related to the way money flows. And that's no secret. That's not our purpose here. Our purpose is to make things safer, simpler, lower cost, and longer lasting. There's so much in that, we don't have to get into the politics of it. So I think that's about all I can really say about it. Can I start presenting? Sometimes it's hard to do. Oh, I got there. All right. So hardly any time for questions. Oh, you know what? I don't have my bullet points here. I missed my bullet points. Here's our bullet points. So here's my point. Federal consensus processes are intended to be as open as ANSI consensus processes, but they move at different speeds. I indicated that in more detail on this week's webpage, if you go there and take a look at it. Many amendments to existing federal law resemble the continuous maintenance process of ANSI-accredited documents. So in that list of proposed legislation I showed you, you will see that they're making just fine adjustments to existing laws that were very difficult to get through both houses in a presidential signature. So they're always maintaining them. So we need to be mindful that just as we have to watch UL and ASHRAE and NSF and all those that are making small changes, by the syllable and the verb and the noun, that the federal government is also tweaking their federal documents in a similar way. We try to make the point that there's a problem with the rate at which these documents or these ideas travel. ANSI consensus processes are inspired by people close to the action. Legislative, no, and they'll move at different speeds. Sometimes they need to move fast, as I've indicated on this week's webpage. So let's see, second bullet point, all regulatory advocacy enterprises in the education industry are devoted to academic and financial enterprises, not to facilities enterprises. So when you look at the larger trade associations, you see that they're active dealing with things like student loans, privacy, and selecting board members. They're not dealing with the $300 billion that we spend every year. 4, there are many education facility industry trade associations, all of whom have business models successful enough so they don't need a facilities advocacy enterprise. So we've said this before, that we have many trade associations in the education facilities industry, and most of them are doing very well and don't need to get sullied by some of the difficult work that we have to do here. And maybe I should pull back on that word sullied, but it's difficult work. I think it's fairly clear that we're dealing with a type of work that is subtle and mostly takes a very long time to accomplish. But when they are accomplished, it becomes a permanent part of your cost structure. So in any case, Captain Navia says it's necessary to be present in both the federal and global standards development processes, because as I like to say, regulators in different nations inspire each other's regulations. Okay, so our cinematic moment this week is that what we're finding here is that even what we call lobbyists, and lobbyists have changed their name, by the way. They're called the Association of Government Relations Professionals, and I suppose that helps them. But what we're seeing now in what I call the era of streaming regulation is that not even lobbyists. Now, lobbyists is a profession. You have to know the ins and outs, the subtleties. A lot of them are lawyers. You have to know the laws. But even they are being locked out by campaign supporters. And so we need to commiserate with their, very often people are getting paid to represent their interest. The American system is set up so that you're not, how do I say this? Just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a voice. Is it proportionate? It seems clear, but you still have a voice. And the federal agencies try to make up for that to some degree, just as we try to make sure that we represent our user interests and still be respectful of the organizations that are selling to us. So it's a very fine line. We're in the fine line business here, I suppose. And I think that is pretty much it. Did I miss anything, folks?
I think you've got it all covered, Mike.
Yeah, is that enough? That is all you can stand?
Final say so here.
Sounds good.
Yeah, okay. Well, all right. So the deal is, try to repeat, is that we'll be here again next week. I know what we're doing. Excuse me, it's a long weekend. So we're going to be having our colleagues from NSF International across town. They're going to show us the balloting process. I thought that when everyone watches C-SPAN, you can see a rather excruciating balloting process. They've computerized it to some degree, but you can see that it's a fairly sophisticated one, and it's very controlled as much as any voting election is controlled. So getting some insight into that, I think you'll be impressed by that, even though, counting ballots may not sound like glamorous work. It is brought to a high art by some of the software developers with the intention of being fair. Who was it? Lenin said, or was it, democracy doesn't lie in who votes, it lies in who's counting the votes, something of that nature. So in any case, next week is NSF International. That'll be a pre-record, so everybody can have a longer weekend starting on Friday. It'll be up there no later than Friday. So I say Friday noon, you'll see it, if not before. So we'll post it up there on our website. And then finally, I try to restate, our point here is to work in small, looking for small innovations at the work point. We call it innovation from the accumulation of marginal gains. Everybody has an idea close to them that could be brought upward and made to make our cities better. I like to show this here. I'm trying to use this to convey the speed at which we need to work, but also if we innovate at that speed in this fashion, that we will contribute value to our industry. Somehow we got from there to there to there, and very often it wasn't because of high drama. This was probably dramatic here. But in general, you still see four wheels, but a lot of things were happening to go from here to here. And if we just keep diligently working on them in small pieces, modest, manageable pieces, we'll get to where we want to be. So with that, I hope everyone has a good weekend. Anything else from anyone? No? Okay.
No.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on the Worldwide Inner Tubes next week. Bye-bye.